D&D, battling with legends of yore. It's D&D. Never kissed a lady before. Nope. Welcome back to StillerBros at the Movies, where today we are going to be exploring a new world of magic, mysticism, and just plain weirdness. Ladies, gentlemen, and everything in between, we have Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves.
So obviously the Dungeons and Dragons franchise has gained its infamy over the last 4 or 5 decades as one of the biggest phenomena in geek culture.
Now, granted, it's very much been a project, a game that's been maligned and also beloved amongst its fan base, and there's obvious reasons why. And for some, it's an escape, a place where you can go on adventures that you could never possibly go on. You could make up stories with your friends and improv along the way. We were in Tactical Games Club in high school. I know, we're nerds. Isn't that shocking? But we didn't technically play D&D, but we played like light versions of it, where the only thing missing was the fact that we didn't have like character sheets and stats written down hard. So
we had regular original game. We had more original games created by our DMs, one of whom has been on this channel. Hi, Nick.
Anyway, the point that we're getting at is that Dungeons and Dragons to us is basically a great creative outlet, and it's probably the reason why we wanted so much to be creatives in the first place, because it was just so fun to sit around and play these stories and make fun of it occasionally too. And thank God that we had DMs who had good senses of humor about the fact that when you're in a D&D game, you're constantly kind of getting the guys who are making jokes about it, the guys who take it way too seriously, the guys who are just there because they're just generally nerdy. Somehow we had a table that everyone was kind of all of them at once. So once again, luckily we had DMs who were willing to make jokes. I, for one, remember specifically the time that I decided, hey, I'm going to kick this enemy in the nuts. Granted, I called it the fork of the legs because I had just reread Aragon, and I thought, that would be funny if I just kicked this guy in the nuts right now. And our DM perfectly let that happen.
Yes, but obviously with the popularity of Dungeons and Dragons, including several celebrity fans, including the likes of Joe Manganiello, Kevin Smith, Jon Favreau, and many more, a Dungeons and Dragons movie has been all but inevitable multiple times throughout the history of the game.
And in 1990, it happened. It sucked, but it happened. 33 years
later, we get another attempt at a Dungeons and Dragons universe with this movie.
Now, people have already been giving this movie a little bit of credit. Well, I say people, but what I really mean is reactionary dipshits on the internet have been giving this movie crap because one of its directors is explicitly stated that basically what they did was they made an original story and they used Dungeons and Dragons as a means of making it. To which I say, have you ever played Dungeons and Dragons? That's kind of how it works.
Almost every movie is a Dungeons and Dragons campaign.
If you think about how a Dungeons and Dragons campaign works, pretty much every movie that is in some way a quest type movie can essentially be boiled down to, it's like a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. Whether it be Willow, Guardians of the Galaxy, or even the Muppet movie could be considered a Dungeons and Dragons campaign.
Yeah, but this time around we have some very interesting casting and very interesting people behind the camera, including writer-directors John Francis Daly and Jonathan Goldstein, this is only their third movie. Their first two being the 2015 reboot of Vacation,
which you can take or leave, really,
and Game Nights,
the dark comedy with Jason Bateman from a few years back that I'm sure people remember, but it's not. But it wasn't. But it was mostly just kind of given a bit of a box office bump by the fact that briefly, the weekend they released it, John Francis Daly and Jonathan Goldstein were given the reins of the Flash movie briefly.
Also, everybody was just kind of touting how insanely competently made it was. And watched it. Yeah, you can see why.
But when it comes to this movie, John Francis Daly actually has a bit of a connection to Dungeons and Dragons because one of his first big acting roles was in Freaks and Geeks, which we've never seen, but judging by the fact that they had a Dungeons and Dragons game, it's basically, what if Stranger Things had no sci-fi in it?
And it took place in what was, at that point, present day.
Because John Francis Daly and Jonathan Goldstein have had their work put out there as writers beforehand, writing the movies such as The Horrible Bosses duology and the Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs sequel and a few other movies before they eventually got their chance to direct. Heck, we have also got a pretty star-studded cast of also Dungeons and Dragons players. Along for the ride, we have got Chris Pine playing a bard, which means that he gets to be the one who tells all the jokes and does all the funny stuff, because it's Chris Pine dancing around with a mandolin and quipping. What more could you ask for?
We also have Michelle Rodriguez, who was introduced by one of the biggest D&D nerds in all of Hollywood culture right now, Vin Diesel.
And I'm sure that when she signed on for this role, Vin was like, "Can I get a cameo? Come on, we're family."
We also have Justice Smith, Hugh Grant, and plenty of other people along the way.
Sophia Lillis, and of course, jumping in a somewhat major cameo, Bridgerton's Rege-Jean Page.
It's Rege-Jean Page.
And all I can think is, and everybody is just touting this as a great movie, as it's Guardians of the Galaxy in a fantasy heading and everything like that, and it sounds amazing. I'm sure it's better than Mazes and Monsters, the first movie to ever make any kind of public comment on the Dungeons and Dragons craze, starring young Tom Hanks. I recommend it as a so bad it's good watch.
Don't watch it alone. It'll be much more hilarious if you riff it with your friends. And all I will say, the one thing I will spoil for you, is that our quote-unquote main character opens the movie wearing a German army helmet for no goddamn reason.
And it only gets crazier from there.
It is such a stupid movie about anti-D&D. It's just trying to be anti-D&D, but it's about as anti-D&D as Escape from Tomorrow was anti-Disney parks.
Anyway, after that tangent, Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves. It's weird that this movie exists all these years later. It's weird that Hollywood did not realize a long time ago, hey, Dungeons and Dragons is such a modular game that we can literally tell any story over it, and all we need to do is insert specific lore things. This isn't The Last of Us, where there's characters and a story that you need to adapt, otherwise the fans are going to be really angry. Dungeons and Dragons is basically made in such a way that you've got pieces of lore to make up, and all you need to do is insert your friend's characters into a story.
It's a blank slate. Dungeons and Dragons was always designed as a blank slate without having to deal with world build of a story, without having to deal with world building. You can create your own story and your own characters and all of this new stuff, but it's in this world. It was very much the lead-in to what fan fiction typically is nowadays.
And of course, it's just kind of fun that we finally have a Dungeons and Dragons movie. It's a movie, at least one that people can be proud of. I have serious doubts that when it comes to villains hamming it up, Hugh Grant will have nothing on Jeremy Irons. Pardon me. Would you mind letting fire and blood rain down upon you? No. All right. I'll go see myself out then.
Hugh Grant was sounding a little Australian there at the end.
Shut up. Anyway, now that we've rambled and done terrible Hugh Grant impressions, we'll just let you guys go and we'll talk to you after the jump. Bye. So, Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves.
I think I can go as of at this very moment. I can say with absolute certainty that was John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein's best movie so far.
Granted, they've made 3 movies, and that's not really a crowning achievement when your track record is the first is the Vacation reboot and Game Night. But you know what? Whatever. This is them at the peak of their powers as filmmakers, and so let's talk about it. For one thing, apparently they were very strict about keeping to the script on this, which is weird for comedy directors, but clearly they had a vision in mind and they stuck to it, and the vision was pretty damn good. I especially love the fact that this is just a straight fantasy movie with very specific Dungeons and Dragons-esque things attached to it.
Yeah, it definitely is just adding Dungeons and Dragons lore to this movie.
And of course, there's the fact that fire truck. Anyway, but there's the fact that this is very much just a fun adventure movie with set in a fantasy realm, and it could have essentially been an original movie, but they put the Dungeons and Dragons name on it, and of course everyone came running.
Yeah, it's a Dungeons and Dragons movie, but you don't need to be a level 7 cleric to know about what's going on in the movie.
Yeah, it's the lore is most of the lore is original, but the world is very much feels very much lived in.
Like we said at the beginning, it's Dungeons and Dragons was always just the first step of was always basically the original version of fan fiction, where they just gave you lore and character types and everything, and you just kind of went with it from there. And this very much shows that.
And it feels like they're using it, but they're also very much scratching the surface. Like, we've got all these characters and classes and races merged together, but you feel like they're kind of scratching the surface. Like, there's only about 2 Dragonborns throughout the entire thing, and
we get one owlbear. We have some amazing stuff.
We've got a few fun cameos that we dare not spoil and oil, because even we didn't know who they was them until we looked it up a bit later, sitting in our seats.
Yeah.
But yeah, world-wise, Dungeons and Dragons-wise, this is a very solid fantasy movie with a very simple premise of that just about every Dungeons and Dragons party has got to go through on their campaign of there's a rich asshole with a MacGuffin. Your job is to kill that rich asshole and steal the MacGuffin. And pretty simple.
Yeah, and you're pretty much just going on fetch quest after fetch quest. There's side quests. It's basically just a Dungeons and Dragons campaign whittled down to about a 2-hour movie, to a 2.5 hour movie, similar to what Vox Machina is doing with Critical Role, only with less swearing and sex and violence.
But amongst the party, we have got the likes of Chris Pine as a funny bard once again showing off that, hey guys, this Captain Kirk can sing.
We have Michelle Rodriguez just basically playing to type as she normally does. Same with Justice Smith to a degree.
Justice Smith basically has gotten to the point where he just plays he's the anxiety-riddled nerd, but he plays it to perfection in so many ways. Sophia Lillis as essentially the druid? Yes, druid.
Yes, druid.
Sophia Lillis as the druid who plays her part well. I wish she had more to do, because sometimes she's just kind of standing with the party, letting everybody.
She's the newer member of the party, so it's obvious that she doesn't have the exact same camaraderie as the rest of the group, but it feels like they could have done more with her.
Yeah, she's obviously there. She plays the part well, but it feels kind of like the movie doesn't quite know what to do with her when she's not necessary for whatever scheme Chris Pine is cooking up for them.
Yes.
Hugh Grant, of course, is playing his typical shtick to the hilt. Only this time playing as an aristocratic fop who is secretly a con man.
Ever since ever since Hugh Grant came back sort of had his second career renaissance, his type has gone from the stuttery British man in the rom-coms to kind of a foppish, over-the-top performer showing performances. Which
judging by what I know about the way he would act in public during his heyday, is a little bit closer to how he is in real life.
Yes.
Not to knock Hugh Grant, because it's still just fun that he kind of just hangs around in movies like this that he never would have been caught dead in the 20 years ago when he was still doing stuff like Notting Hill.
Yeah. And then we have Rege-Jean Page in a role that clearly shows that sometimes it's just not fair sometimes when God gives with both hands.
Like, it's one thing for every woman to be fawning all over him, but then for him to play a paladin whose whole joke is just how perfect he is, and him being able to pull that off no problem. It's just not fair, man.
It's not. You have to have everything. You can't be that attractive. You're that attractive and that talented. What's wrong with you?
This is our thing with Josh Groban all over again, where it's like, can you be bad at one thing for us? But I mean, when it comes down to it, there's a few things to get into that are kind of weaker. It is a bit. The movie does feel the need to be a bit heavy on exposition, but it's not like world heavy exposition. It's very much story driven stuff. So it doesn't feel the need to stop and explain what an owlbear is. It just kind of assumes you are aware that an owlbear is a creature that is a bear with an owl head.
Yeah, or it doesn't talk down to you, so if you're not, but again, you don't have to be a master at the lore to get what's going on.
It's a very stock fantasy movie, and I think that was the intention, because they don't need to explain because they don't feel the need to explain everything. You just kind of get the idea that it's just like when there's the gelatinous acid cube. It's just like this is a cube. You go into it, you burn. End of story. They don't need to They don't need to go over the 5 pages of lore that Gary Gygax scribbled on a napkin one night.
It's a very approachable. It's a fantasy at a very approachable level, but it has this feel of just Guardians of the Galaxy in the medieval setting, which is exactly the kind of movie that a Dungeons and Dragons movie probably should be. Will we get a sequel? I kind of hope so.
I mean, once again, this movie basically just scratches the surface of. It feels like it scratches the surface of the world, and once again, we have between this and Vox Machina. It's shown that there is a consistent tone and story structure that that the creators of a world like this can play with.
Yeah. And obviously, anything that John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein do after this is going to be amazing, because they've now shown how amazing of filmmakers they can be. Not just the guys who made that one insane shot in Game Nights, that one insane oneer sequence in Game Nights.
Speaking of which, there is another insane oneer.
There's actually a couple insane oneers in this movie.
But when it comes to directing, they're not doing anything particularly flashy. At least once early on, there was a shaky cam scene where I'm like, okay, guys, shaking the camera a little too much, but a little too much. I can barely see Chris Pine running, but
it's a fairly competently made movie. There's a lot of competent camera movement. It's not necessarily the most creative camera tricks, but they're using film language, but they're competent in film language, and they know how to shoot action very well.
And of course there's a couple cool shots that they were clearly sitting with their cinematographer and planning and being like, this is going to be the cool trailer shots. So obviously they had fun. They had fun with this, and once again they very much showed that they can be serious. Like near the end, I'm just like, did the writers of Horrible Bosses just make me feel something?
Yeah, because you get to the end and you feel it, and it's like, where does a Dungeons and Dragons movie get off making me feel things? And it's not just, and we've felt we've had jump scares, we've had feelings, we've had lots of laughs, we've had a lot of action. Where were these guys when we were sitting and watching Vacation?
Yeah. So, apparently this is the thing that they were like, we're gonna go ahead and try a little bit.
Which kind of makes me pissed off that they didn't get to make their version of the Flash.
But we'll see how the version of the Flash that we're getting works out in a couple months.
Yes.
But for right now, Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Amongst Thieves is the pretty much the definitive way Dungeons and Dragons movie. It feels very much like the exact kind of movie that you and your friends make up when you're sitting around a Dungeons and Dragons table and making up a story.
Except it cuts out all your snarky dialogue and your bullshit. Except it cuts out you guys bullshitting for like 45 minutes about nothing, and
it cuts out all the parts where you roll the dice and try to strategize and everything like that. It's bare bones. But it works when it needs to. So I'd say this is worth a watch, and hopefully there's a sequel. If not, we'll see them try again. But the way that things are looking for this, we might have a sequel on the horizon.
Yep, we'll see.
And so with that, yeah, guys, we are just gonna say we're out of here. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, comment what you thought of Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Amongst Thieves, and don't forget to tune in next time when Mushroom Kingdom, here we come. Bye.
Bye.